How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's so nice to see you again.
It's been too long. Thanks for
It's,
having me today.
it has been far too long, but I will take any opportunity I can to have the chance to have a conversation with you, or oftentimes, sometimes, more so with your food as well, which we've all got to experience at Forbes, and which what we really love. So thanks for being here.
No, great. Beautiful sunny day in New York. They said it was going to rain, but I'm happy the sun is out and the weather's staying consistent.
I will,
Thanks for.
I will take, well, I'm in New York as well. So if everyone here starts to hear like these sirens going crazy, that is the soundtrack of our beloved city. Um, so apologies in advance. But JJ, I want to sort of start off because when I think about when we first got to know you and just the extraordinary ride that you've been on for the past couple of years. In 2019, you opened up your first restaurant to a lot of success, but obviously 2020 hit. Pandemic was really difficult. I read that you had to lay off 90% of your staff, but you were able to pivot in a really interesting way, really deeply community-driven way that evolved your business in different directions. Can you talk about that experience for you?
Yeah, so I just let everybody know I'm Chef JJ. I'm chef and founder of FieldTrip, New York City. I have a location in Harlem between 115th and 116th Street, another location in Rockefeller Center. We're a rice bowl shop. Everything is under $14. And the first time I credit Forbes for making my career because I made the Forbes 30 under 30 list when I was a chef at the Cecil, cooking food called Afro-Asian American. So one of the first big publications to write about me and push me on my trajectory. Yeah, when you open a business, you never know, right? You're just trying to get to open the doors, or everybody starting a business is just opening doors. And who knew there would be a pandemic? That's not something that you write in the business plan. That's not something you put in the investor deck. And my goal was just to try to figure out how to get quality food to people in a community of Harlem that don't get an option to choose consciously better for you food, right? At an affordable rate. And I put in a corridor between 115th and 116th Street, Malcolm X Boulevard, which has one of the highest unemployment rates in New York City, one of the lowest income mediums, and I think of New York State, one of the lowest. And most people thought I was crazy because they were like, well, if this is the income medium, why would they be eating, peri-peri salmon and pineapple black fried rice? And I was like, people want this. They're consciously want to eat better. And that was the first step. And the hardest thing in the beginning for me in the first 6 months before the pandemic hit, it was building trust. And I think when you go into communities, right, any community you go into, it could be high, low, or medium, you have to figure out how to build trust. Why are they going to spend money with you? Why do they believe in your mission? And so that was the first step of just having real conversation with real people.
Can I ask you just what advice would you sort of give to others if building that trust is so important going into the community, regardless of what you're doing? What did you do or do well or not well, at least in the beginning, that allowed you to ultimately build momentum? Were there any lessons learned or what not to do in those first 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, in the first 6 months, I was super hands-on, went to community board meetings, talked to my neighbors, talk to the people that hang out on the corner and just walking by, really introducing myself to a Harlem community that maybe didn't know who I was. And I also think in the cycle of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Gentrification in certain neighborhoods, communities kind of shell up. They build brick walls and saying, oh, we've seen this before. We know this is not for us. And I had to let Harlem know, like, this restaurant is built for you. Restaurant isn't built. This is built for the people of Harlem, new, old, continuous, young, old, whoever it might be. This is who it's built for. And we just had to lead with that and kind of like that show me, like people say, show me, like had to really show up. But you have to also just be active. You can't think that, even if you open an online business, like a virtual business, that you think you have to figure out how to connect with folks in that virtual community or in the 4x4 block radius you're in. The same thing we did when we opened up in Rockefeller Center. You know, the goal there was to give MTA employees, construction workers, everyday folks that work in Midtown an option not to have to buy a $19 meal, right? That you can walk in and get a $9.99 veggie bowl or $10.99 chicken bowl. And it was out there talking to folks. So we did like these golden tickets where we were handing out golden tickets to people early on when we opened up in the second wave of the pandemic in Rockefeller Center. And now people understand why we were there. So we consider ourselves like a community builder, and really touching people. And it's hard. It is hard work. It's not easy at all.
You make such a good point though, because when you start a business, right, it's a fire hose of things that you're doing every day just to keep the business going. But the fact that you also had the foresight that sort of part of your remit was to invest that much time into the community, to build that trust, not just to have a great restaurant, accessibility, great experience, but to also invest in the community, which is, a huge time commitment, but what you mentioned, so integral to your success. When the pandemic hit, and there's no playbook for any business, and we all know that the restaurant industry in particular just overnight evaporated. Can you walk through that experience and the ways in which you thought about how you could lean into that aspect of your relationship to the community to ultimately build back stronger?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely walk you through, I think in being a Black business owner, days are always rough, right? Owning a business is always hard. And so it never crossed my mind to close FieldTrip. Right? Like I would talk to my dad on the phone. He's like, you're not going to close this place. Like you can't afford to close it, because if you close the doors, you're not coming back. Right? And I remember Danny Meyer going on TV and saying he's going to close all his restaurants for 3 weeks and we're going to come back and everything's going to be okay. And a lot of people followed him, right? As the pinnacle, the guy at the top. And my wife, being a nurse that was like in it, she was like, no, it's not going to be 3 weeks. It's going to be like 3 months. So don't think 3 weeks. And I was telling a lot of my peers closing restaurants, don't close your restaurant. It's not 3 weeks, guys. Like just figure out how to keep some type of cash flow going. And I kept it going. I went to every individual employee and said, hey, you see the sales are declining. I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to, cut you back to about maybe 5 or 6 hours a week, which is like crazy even saying that to somebody. And I remember a young woman named Iris who worked for me was like, no, give my 5 or 6 hours to Shay. I'll be okay. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, don't worry, just call. When we come back, you're going to be here. When you come back, I know I'll get my hours back. So just give my 5 or 6 hours to Shay or Kira. And that's how it started. A lot of people were like, don't worry, JJ, I'll be okay. When you need me, just call me. And that was the first time in my career was like, I didn't have to go to the peanut gallery. I didn't have to go to the gatekeepers and say, this is what I wanted to do. I had these heart-to-heart conversations as a business owner with the people that worked for me really hard. And we scaled down. It was literally me, a manager, and a prep cook. I opened the gate. I closed the gate. We went 6 days a week. It was the hardest I ever worked during the pandemic. And actually the community of Harlem, people that didn't believe I owned the restaurant, started to be like, yo, man, you must really do own this spot, because I see you closing the gate. I see you mopping the floors, right? So, and then what we did was we built this buy a bowl program. So one of my old partners, Will Sears, I brought in my sister, who's very familiar with nonprofit world, some other people, and we built this buy a bowl program because we started to feed hospitals and frontline workers during the pandemic. My wife's hospital first, then Harlem Hospital, and we kept it very just uptown, focused on uptown hospitals, Mount Sinai, Columbia Press. We were hospitals in the Bronx were calling us, telling us there's no food, the deli just closed. And so we were just sending food to everybody, and the whole country got behind FieldTrip, and we built this buy a bowl program. We made no money off of it, and it allowed me to bring my staff back. And to date now, we still feed people. We've done close to 300,000 meals.
Which is incredible, and just the incredible goodwill and support that came out just given the work that you guys were doing, and the way in which you stayed so committed, to being able to stay true to your core.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were walking through the doors. They used to be our patrons and being like, "I'll work for food." It was a really gut check. With my grandfather telling me, "Be thankful you have a roof over your head and food on the table," and that was like that like full 360 moment of like when you're a young kid, you're like, "What you talking about, old man?" Right? Because we take those things really for granted. And during the pandemic, it made me also realize that restaurants are the backbone of America. They do more than just feed. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And we can actually end hunger and a bunch of stuff in the world if you lean on restaurants.
During that time period where you were working 24 hours a day, and really just in this mode of supporting the community, ensuring that you didn't shut down the business, are there one or two lessons that you took out of that experience that have been really formative for you in terms of how you think about this next chapter of the company?
You know, if the people really believe in you, they'll show up and support you. And like, I remember the day Governor Cuomo said he was closing restaurants, but nobody knew it was going to delivery and takeout only. I felt like the whole Harlem came to FieldTrip. Like, I was like, what's going on here? I can't cook food fast enough. But it showed me, like, if you really put yourself out there, you show vulnerability, you talk about your mission, you really help out folks along the way, that people will come and support that, right? Because you can get rice from anywhere. You can get a roasted chicken anywhere, right? You can get an air conditioner anywhere. And people will really support that. And then two, I think just like really hiring like really good folks, really good people. That's what I really learned. Like without the FieldTrip staff, like that staff during the pandemic, there would have been no FieldTrip. Didn't matter what I wanted to do, what I wanted to push for. Like people were coming to work like we didn't know what was going on. Like it was unsafe, double mask, triple mask, right? Like really coming to work to push to feed other people, to make sure a business survived. So I really learned like don't take for granted your team, like really support them. And what we've evolved into for FieldTrip is like I tell everybody I worked at FieldTrip, it's a safe space. This is a safe space. We all go through things in life. So if you're vulnerable and honest to us, Lisa Cash, our director of operations, we'll always try to figure out how to make it work for you because we know how hard you work for us or work with us. And that was the biggest thing that I learned.
You know, I want to talk a little bit more about, you know, what you mentioned earlier at the beginning of our conversation, around how you really came into different communities, your mission behind this restaurant. You know, you've talked about how rice is this food that is a common connector across cultures and tables around the world. You took sort of this concept, made it very accessible to those who may not necessarily typically have access or been exposed to these types of foods or opportunities before. What role do you see FieldTrip playing in terms of shaping a cultural narrative, but also the ways in which the role it plays within the communities that you're continuing to build in?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's fully loaded question. Our slogan is rice is culture. I believe everybody has grown up in some type of rice culture. Either you've grown up around a rice grain, if you're fortunate, you've grown up around a specific rice grain, or you grew up around a rice dish. And if you don't really know a culture, you're trying to learn a culture, you can go eat that rice. Biryani, you can eat coconut rice and peas. You can have a roast con gandules, jollof rice. Like you can literally go and rice grain and then learn about the culture. And it kind of breaks down all the barriers. You can have a conversation over it. You can learn about stuff. Like I remember going to Israel and eating, Israel red beans and rice. And it was like, what is this? Oh, and then really learn how that worked, right? And how the people moved and shaped in that culture. So I believe rice is like, here in the United States, one of the most disrespected ingredients, but the foundation of all culture, right? And if you take that, you take the implant of FieldTrip and you start to plug that into communities, right, that are mixed race communities, different people, and create this kind of safe space around this grain, you start to have these people start to have conversations that they never had before. And I think some of the greatest moments in Field Trip is like, you'll see firefighters, you'll see police officers, you'll see Harlem Nights, you'll see moms, you'll see nannies, all sitting down or in the line, and they're just talking like, so what are you getting, the pineapple black fried rice? I never had that before. So it just naturally creates this conversation, which then makes everybody feel like I'm human. Like we're just the same person. And that's what we hope to do for Field Trip is like, breaks down barriers. We start to put it in communities that start to make people respect culture that they maybe never respected before. And also from a bigger picture is that United States rice culture at one point was really big. And how can we start to bring that back in a very accessible route, right? Because the rice you see at Field Trip is the same rice that you'll see at 11 Madison Park, you'll see at Sean Brock's restaurant, you'll see at Alinea, right? We just sell that same rice for $10, right? Carolina Gold rice or Texas brown rice or, no bleacher and rich rice. It's the same rice, but we're just letting everybody know it's accessible. Don't think about it as like this highbrow. And I think if that happens, we'll start to move forward where you'll go to the grocery store one day and you'll start to see refrigerated rice or frozen rice on the shelf.
So I have to ask you, what business do you say that you're in? Because obviously you're a chef, you're a founder, but when you talk about food or the role that the food is playing, obviously it's to feed people, but it's a much bigger role and mission behind the work that you're doing.
I think I've been groomed by you guys as a big thinker. And going to all these Forbes 30 under 30 summits, it makes your brain go so many different ways. But food is the ultimate vessel. It's just this conversation starter. And, like Tesla is a, energy company, right? They just happen to have cars. Or Amazon is this, trucking company that just happens to have products, or however we look at it. FieldTrip is potentially, an agricultural company, community activism is company, that just happens to cook food that really tastes really good.
Yeah, and I can attest to it. It tastes very, very good. Last question for you as we wrap up. A lot of these conversations I've been having the past couple of weeks, I've asked leaders such as yourself as we're heading into college graduation season, and particularly as young people are heading into a work world that is very different than the one I entered, or even the one that people 5 years ago entered. Is there one piece of advice that you want to give newly minted college grads as they're entering the workforce for the first time and they're thinking about their careers and the opportunities ahead of them?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. The workforce I entered was a lot different than now or even 5 years ago. But I always believe in this, like when you're coming into the workforce, you should go work for somebody that you believe in, right? Like you don't have enough knowledge yet, right? You might, unless you created something in college that's like crushing, right? But there's like that one person, right?
Yeah.
And if you're go work for somebody you believe in, because that's going to help that first phase, right? So like if you believe in the CEO or you believe in that CMO, go work underneath them. Go put in the 2 years. Don't just put in 1 year. You need to at least put 2 years in to grab the knowledge, right? Because the first couple of months are rough. You're trying to get in a rhythm. You're like, what's going on? I don't understand the language. But as every day goes on, it starts to change. And then you will then grow. And in those 2 years out of college, you will then figure out what you want to do. It will help guide you on the yellow brick road. And I'll give this prime example. Like I graduated college, I wanted to work in Puerto Rico for the Ritz-Carlton. It didn't work out. I worked for Wegmans management training program, hated it. Whoever knew prepared foods would be a big thing. I was working in prepared foods. I laughed and I said, I went to Culinary Institute of America. What do you guys know? And me and the chef butted heads and I parted ways. And I went to go work at Jane Restaurant on West Houston between Thompson and LaGuardia. Never knew the chef, never knew the culture. But I ate the food first, and I fell in love with the food. And I was like, okay, I want to learn about this food. And then I love the culture. And come to find out, I helped open up the first Smith in New York City. I was a part of that whole process of how they developed it, what it was like, the feeling, touching it. I look back on my career, I look back on FieldTrip and go, oh, without that experience, I probably would have never been able to create FieldTrip, because I will always go back to those notes and say, they did this, they looked at this, they did research here, and let me see if I apply that, because I know how that works now. So some of the payoff takes 5-10 years before you actually have the tools in the toolbox. But yeah, go out and work for somebody you believe in, and look at it from an overall picture, right? I think my chief of staff, Kara, tells me all the time, there's so many perks working with you, but it's really hard to talk about it, right? And but I tell people anytime I work for me, you get to meet so many different people from so many different industries that hopefully the trajectory of your career will surpass me working beside me. So go out, work for somebody you believe in. And like if I was working in the industry and I wanted to be in like sales or CMO marketing and in the media world, I would go work for Jessica Sibley.
Not me, JJ.
No, not just.
I'm feeling a little insulted here.
No, of course, but y'all the same level. You guys. But you go work for.
I would work, yeah. But it's great. But I think it's a great reminder to find the people. It's always about the people. It's not necessarily even about the company or the industry that you're in. It's always about those people, and the experiences are invaluable. And you made such a good point that you never know when you're going to have to tap into those. Like you have to be patient because you don't know when the payoff is going to hit. But ultimately, I love that idea of the toolbox. Ultimately, if you have it there, it will be a resource that you inevitably draw on.
And I also think a lot of companies are looking for the youth to help develop the next phase of the company, right? The greatest companies are taking that youth energy and saying, hold on, you said that? Hold on, let's figure out how to execute that. Because the youth will, makes the company evolve. So,
well, I think this is all great advice, and I'm so appreciative that we got to spend time together. And you talking about the importance of going to work for people you can learn from and who really draw out that curiosity. You are one of those people. You're one of those people who I know is a great inspiration, not just as a chef, but also as a founder, building this incredible restaurant business, but someone who also leads by giving back to the community and understands that you can have a great business and do good at the same time. And so thank you for all your advice here today. Hopefully I'll be back in one of your restaurants, seeing you sometime soon.
Yeah, we would love to have you. Or you ever do something at Fifth, let me know. We'll drop some food off anytime for you.
Well, I would be careful what you say, because I'll definitely take it. That is an offer I will take someone up on. Your food, for sure. Well, yeah, so good. So we'll definitely follow up on that. Best of luck with what's ahead. I'm really excited to see how you guys continue to launch and grow, and also create such a blueprint around the power of giving back to and tapping into the community. So thanks for joining us here today, and thanks everyone for being a part of the conversation. And we look forward to seeing you back here next time. And JJ, I look forward to seeing you in your restaurant soon.
Thank you. You have a beautiful rest of your day and great weekend.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.